And then, since we're all here, what I thought would be a great idea is when we're done, we clear the chairs and we fight. And I have this because I want to be as much like James Lipton as possible. Is Dottie here tonight? And there's a microphone, there's a couple of microphones, so we'll be passing them around. Diane, you have one there. But my first question is for you, Rich. You produced the film. Did this come about, this came about obviously before the film was made. Pee Wee Herman was not, I mean, he was known, he was a cult figure. He wasn't a nationally known a celebrity. He had done an HBO, as far as people who didn't live in LA were concerned, he had done an HBO special and he had been on Letterman. That was...
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Actually, to be quite honest with you, and I've run into David Letterman a few times over the years, because we've both been involved in racing. And I said, I would be nowhere, and Paul would have been nowhere without David Letterman. David Letterman, the fact that David put him on the show, even before I got involved, and every 2 years, every 2 months, I mean, Paul would appear.
Yeah, I mean, Paul would appear on Letterman every 2 weeks, every 2 months he would go on.
Paul would appear on Letterman, and so what happened was, a great guy, unfortunately, a bunch of people should be here tonight, but they passed away, including Paul, unfortunately. And, I can tell you quickly how it.
I, for a minute, thought that maybe some more people had passed away in between the beginning of the film and when I was supposed to bring them out.
If I could understand a word of what you said, I would try to answer you.
It's just me versus Killy McGee upstairs. So he's popular on Letterman, but somebody at Warner Brothers, did you go to Warner Brothers and say we want to do a movie, or how did that come about? Because that's a big jump from an HBO special and a couple of Lettermans to starring in a movie.
Well, what happened was I'm going to make this real quick. Bill McEwen and I, who was Steve Martin's manager, were stranded in Denver, Colorado for 5 days in a snowstorm. And Bill McEwen was in one room and I was in another room. They left us behind. We were doing test screenings for a Steve Martin movie called The Man with Two Brains. Oh, some people saw it. Not enough, but some people saw it. In any event, he called me up in the third or fourth night there, he called up and said, you got to turn on Letterman tonight. There's somebody you ought to see, and this is who we should work with, and this is who we should make into a movie star. And that's what we did. We met with Paul. He agreed to work with us, and then we took it around to different studios. Bill and I had deals with Universal and with Warner Brothers. At Universal, unfortunately, the guy who was in charge of production lived next door to Paul when they both went to Cal Arts, and he hated his guts. Couldn't stand him. And so we couldn't do a deal at Universal. And we went over to Warner Brothers, who had actually stranded us in Denver for so long. And a guy by the name of Bob Shapiro, who was the other producer along with myself. And we worked it, and we got them a place to write. I think a lot of people know this. How many people have seen this documentary? Didn't I look good in the documentary? In any event, we got them writing. We made a development deal with Warner Brothers. We took Paul on tour. 22 cities, sold out, ended up at the Universal Amphitheater. By that time, the script was done. We handed the script to the two guys that were running Warner Brothers at the time, Bob Daly and Terry Summel. Terry in the film is named after Terry. And within 2 or 3 days, they said, let's just make it. Let's just make this film. They were so, this was done, we handed them the script after an appearance at the Universal Amphitheater which was the last thing that we did. And the rest, you know. So.
Michael, who I literally dragged onto the stage. Did you work with? It was Paul and Phil Hartman, and how were you a part of that trio?
You know, can you hear me? Yeah. I never heard of Pee Wee Herman, never heard of Phil Hartman, never heard of Paul Rubin.
So you were the perfect man.
Yeah. And Rich Abramson asked me, I was writing something with Christopher Guest, Spinal Tap.
Sure.
And asked me if I wanted to work on this, and I saw the Pee Wee Herman show, and the thing I saw about that show was, not only was it the way it was mounted, everything about it was just terrific and stuff. And but the one thing I saw about it is that it had heart.
Yeah.
And emotion when people couldn't fly and stuff. I mean,
You got to really stick on that mic. Sorry.
You got to do the Jim Morrison, and you really got to swim.
so
Yes, like that. Thank you. But you were the one who, were you of the three the only one that really knew how to write a feature script? Because there's a story that they didn't know how to write a movie, so they bought Sid Field's screenplay and just literally went by the numbers. He loses the bike on page 10. First act ends on page 30. Second act ends on page 60. Was it literally that by the numbers?
No, it wasn't like that at all. The Sid Field book I wouldn't recommend that book for anybody. If you read Sid Field's,
Sure. I read Sid Haig's book about screenplays. Thank you.
I don't recommend it.
But from what I understand, the original idea was to basically cast Pee Wee Herman and Pollyanna. Was that the original idea for this movie?
That was pretty far down the line, but that was the idea that that we sort of started on. We get more than like 2 pages into that or something.
Right.
When the bike came into the picture, and that changed everything. And what we really struggling with, the bike made it just like everything just seemed to fall into place.
It was the simplest plot motivator you could imagine, but it was all you needed.
Right.
Yeah.
And we let's see, when Paul had his 22 city tour, Phil and I wrote the first draft of Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Right.
And then when Paul came back, the 3 of us got together and took it from page 1 and just did it page by page by page. And what we were just trying to figure out was what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the Sid Field's book, pages have different numbers and things like that.
Yeah.
I tried to do that, and I got, really, I couldn't do it. So I realized that this is the way to do it, and Phil and Paul felt the same way too. And so I'll tell you, if I wanted to say what Paul would do. When we came up with Trucker to the highway, I had heard through country music for
Sure.
Phantom 309.
Sure, big Jim and Phantom 309.
Right. And
Let me sing it for you now.
so we started out with that, and Phil wrote the scene with the Phantom 309, the trucker scene.
Right.
And the dialogue, you see in that, that's all Phil Hartman.
Uh-huh.
But the trucker was a guy. He was Big Mac. He wasn't
Large March?
He was Big Mac. And Paul came in one morning and he said, you know, I had a lot of guys in this thing. We didn't have And so, you know, woman trucker, why not? And so then we had to try to figure out a name for him. I said, how about Big Bertha? And then out of the blue, Phil said, how about Large Marge? And we just laughed and laughed, and that's how we got Large Marge.
Well, the Large March scene is one of the most iconic moments in, not only in this movie, but just like in movies, in terms of modern comedies. These guys here did it. There's a great story about it, but this really isn't the time and place. E.G. I am gonna go to you, Edward, but I want to ask E.G. Daly a question first. I'm gonna string you along to get to what that is.
Well, okay.
I will get to it. People have a choice of hearing from E.G. Daly or watching you and I talk.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
There's looks and there's talent.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I was saying we're the looks and they're the talent. See, irony, sometimes you say something blatantly false and you underscore it to the point to make the opposite point. That's called sarcasm. Dottie is here. You're from here. You went to Beverly High School.
Yeah.
Beverly High.
Yeah.
You went to school, from what I understand, from what I've heard, Nick Cage,
Yeah.
Crispin Glover,
Yeah.
my friend Ken Daly, same spelling, who I don't think you knew. And I don't know what Ken did to you that would make you deny that. I'll talk to him about that later. Did this just come from an audition? Did you have any idea what it was that you were going in to read for?
No. Not at all. I just went to a regular audition and there was a lot of like comedian girls that were in there waiting. I think it was Warner Brothers, right? And I just was, I just knew that I had been familiar with the Pee Wee Herman thing,
Right.
the show. So I thought, well, I knew like his girlfriend, I didn't want to play her like this, sexy Hollywood girl. So I just knew she had to be a little bit of a tomboy and just kind of like real, fun, quirky.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just an audition and then that was it.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you lived in LA, you knew about the Pee Wee Herman show, but it was a very sure. It's a very specific kind of humor, and I'm wondering if when you first started rehearsing with Paul, did you have to find the relationship, because he's sort of neutral gender. He's in a lot of ways he's 9 years old. He's not sexualized yet. And did you have to kind of find how to play that stuff?
I think I just really felt like Dottie and Pee Wee are on the same page as far as that. I felt like she was just really into bikes and fixing a bike, and obviously she loved Pee-wee, but I just think they weren't like super sexualized. I personally am, never mind. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. But no, I think they just really like, I just remember showing up on the set, and then there was, I got to see, it wasn't like I spent a lot of time with Paul before that. I just showed up, and I think they just knew what they were looking for. And, there was this wacky, genius director, Tim Burton, and it was his first movie, so we were kind of like, wow, this, I just noticed, like, this guy's really genius. Like, we didn't know anything about him other than the short he had done. And so I just felt
was the short Frankenweenie or Vincent?
Frankenweenie.
Frankenweenie.
Yeah.
And did you watch that before you?
I watched because I was like, wow, they had a lot of really big expectations for him, and I just saw being on the set with him that he was really very meticulous and genius, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I had no idea that the movie was going to be like, we would be coming here 40 years later, and so it's good.
Yeah, I think, Diane, I wanted to ask you, when you were working on this, because it's not a dissimilar, it's one of the things that you guys put into the movie was that you get this top of the second act, it's just every urban legend. Like, it's a beautiful road movie, you bang down every urban legend, you knock them all down. And when you were working on the film, did you feel that the director, was Tim Burton yet? Because it was his first movie. Was he still finding his way?
He was absolutely precious. He came to my little cottage because I had like 5 different Southern accents to do. And I knew I would never get cast as a waitress if I sounded like me. So I thought I'd talk like that. And he came to my little cottage, and he picked out, I wanted, some obscure Southern accent. He wanted the one that everyone would understand.
Right.
But he was just so sweet. And one of my fondest memories is going to the set when I wasn't working. And those days, you could actually do that. You could actually go to Warner Brothers. You didn't have to have, what's his name in the movie? Milton Berle to get in. You just got in. And I went
It's
in.
unfortunate that there are no obvious jokes about Milton.
No. And I went in, and it was the scene where the convict and Pee-wee are falling from the sky in the convertible, and it opens up into a parachute. And I'm watching this, and I went up to Tim and Paul when they were taking a break, and I said, look, you don't know this about me, but I'm very psychic and intuitive, and this is going to be a huger movie than anyone has any idea about. And they just kind of looked at me and smiled. They didn't really believe it. And I just knew, seeing this scene that I had nothing to do with, I could separate and just look, and I thought, oh my God, this is genius.
And then you and Paul got back together.
Yes,
and
twice.
gave birth to the penguin.
Yes. It was a difficult birth.
Yes. But yeah, did you ever joke that was Simone and Pee-wee's child? When you were in the scene?
It's weird because Tim put us in exactly the same positions as he did in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I don't even think he was aware of it, but when you see these stills, we're in exactly the same position. Both movies. It's bizarre. And Paul would crack me up so much before, before Tim would go, and action, I'd say, shut up, Paul, shut up. We have to be serious here. Our baby's eating the cat, And he loved to crack me up. Just loved it. And I kept saying, shut up, shut up.
You were talking about seeing his short films. His first short film was a stop motion short that he made at Disney called Vincent. And That's where I believe some of the Kyoto brothers come in.
Yeah. That's right. How did you know? That's what I
Do I
meant.
call you the Kyodai? What do I call you?
Yeah, I was contacted by Rick Heinrichs, who was Tim Burton's Cal Arts partner.
Right. Did you guys go to Cal Arts?
Pardon?
Did you guys go to Cal Arts?
Oh, no. I teach there now. They would never have accepted me earlier. And they had this really cool project, Vincent. Again, a little boy who believes he's Vincent Price. They had never really done stop motion before, so I was brought on as a technical director and the animator on the project. So I met Rick and Tim at that time, and Tim was always Tim Burton,
Right.
even back then. Talked with his hands, like this, and very, very creative. And he wanted to do something pretty creative with stop motion. He wanted to create a two-dimensional graphic style with a three-dimensional puppet. And it was pretty innovative, and it did pretty well for him in the Chicago Film Festival and all over. But that was my introduction. I was the animator on the project and kind of supervised, how to do the project.
Who here has seen Vincent? It must be on YouTube now. Yeah?
Yeah, it is.
If you haven't seen it, go home and watch it. It's so
much Tim Burton. It's
Yeah.
who Tim Burton is.
It's
He's a
everything
fan.
you need to know. It's right there. It's right there. Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So Rick Heinrichs calls you and says, "I'm doing this movie with Tim Burton, and there's some stop motion we got to do in it."
Yeah, that's right. It was Rick Heinrichs got a hold of me, and he was supervising the animation. He had two animation cuts in the film. It was a Tyrannosaurus Rex and this thing called Large Marge. And I said, I want to do the dinosaur because I love stop motion dinosaurs. And Rick said, no, I'm going to do that one. So I got stuck with Large Marge, and we really didn't know how to do it. So my brothers and I got together, and we decided to do a head casting of Alice Nunn. So we had a head casting. And then we made a flexible mold. We poured clay into it and made this kind of clay facsimile that I would then animate frame by frame. But it never really was that easy. We put fake eyes in it. How did we do it? It looked like a clay dummy. It didn't really work well. So then we figured we used Alice Nunn's wig that she used in the movie. We took her wardrobe, put that on our clay figure. And in fact, Edward, what did you do?
Yeah, actually, it's way more complicated than you would think. 18 frames to see it. There was this elaborate replacement eye cycle that, we cast different size eyes. Charlie painted them. We registered them all on brass stock for precision alignment. My biggest contribution was cut out of the movie. Thank you, Mr. Editor. There was a
He edited it right here. This guy is the editor of the film.
We commandeered a Volkswagen scissor
Look
jack.
at you, Weber. Okay.
We commandeered a Volkswagen scissor jack that was her shoulders, and she shrugged and turned to the camera. But I don't know, it took you like 8 hours to animate that, and it was cut out because the cut in the movie just cuts to the action. She turns in the boo scare, which is the better effect, absolutely.
That's why the scene worked so well. They cut right to the point. But like Edward said, it took me hours to animate and maintain the structure of Alice's face. And the easy part was really manipulating it. But it was interesting. The whole thing was, it took about 12 hours to do the shot. It was all clay animated. I took her face and little by little, I just kind of distorted it to Tim Burton's pre-production designs. He had key moments that he wanted to see in the transition. I followed that, and yeah, it's probably one of the most famous things I've had a chance to work on.
Yeah, it's so iconic. It's so beautiful.
No, the replacement eyes were made, the 15 or 10 sets of them to make the eyes grow and everything. The interesting thing was the clay bust didn't look quite as realistic, and we called Bonnie to come in and do the makeup on it. Bonnie DeHaven. She came in and put the makeup on it and made it look just like Large Marge in the movie. Many of you may not know that Pee-wee did another thing at the MGM Disney Studios in Orlando for the tour. We did a little short with Pee Wee running across the field to meet Daryl Hannah, and she did a large march take. Tim Burton invented that boo scare, which is now the large march take, and we've done it several times. In UHF, we did one, the three of them.
There's one more great thing about this. And Billy Weber, who was the editor, I was just reminding him of that. When we first screened
He worked on Days of Heaven, Badlands, and that made Top Gun. That made you. But I would think like you did work on Taxi Driver. You did work on Badlands, Terrence Scott. That sort of made you the natural choice for this film. But you're a big fan of the Marx Brothers. You're a fan of the Marx Brothers, from what I've read about you.
You're a fan of the Marx Brothers.
Yeah. Tim, this film is very much a live-action cartoon. Does that inform how you edit? Because at a certain point, it becomes your movie for a period.
Can you hear me? Yeah. No, it doesn't inform
Just talk about why you cut his and how that made it so much better.
You did a great job, Bill. You cut it at the right time with the perfect sequence. The build-up, Paul's reaction, and then the final boo cut, top notch.
To answer your question, I cut to tell the story, and that's what I'm always thinking of, is just telling the story. But in the case of this movie, I had just finished editing a picture called Beverly Hills Cop. And Bob Shapiro, who was one of the producers on the movie with Rich, and he knew Marty Brest because Marty's first movie was for Warner Brothers, and Bob was at Warner Brothers at the time.
Martin Brest, who directed Beverly Hills Cop.
I'm sorry, what?
Martin Brest, who directed Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop, and then we were just finishing the mix of Beverly Hills Cop. Bob Shapiro called Marty, and he had heard about Beverly Hills Cop because we had two previews at Paramount on Beverly Hills Cop that went extremely well. It was shocking. The studio was shocked, but it went so well that the word spread throughout Hollywood to the studios how well it went. So Bob Shapiro heard about that and he called Marty, because he knew Marty. He said, "So who's cutting your movie?" And Marty gave him my name. And so Bob called me, would I be interested in coming out to Warner's and talking and meeting this young director he had that he was going to produce a movie for about Pee Wee Herman, starring Pee Wee Herman. And I said, sure, and I went out and I met Tim. At the time, Tim had only done one film called Frankenweenie for Disney. And Disney hated Frankenweenie. And they wanted to cancel Tim's contract immediately. So the guy was pretty much head of feature production at Warner's, David Rosenberg, what was his name? He passed away. The guy who was head of production at Warner's at the time.
Let's just call him Money Powerman.
No. I have to remember his name. I just can't. But anyway, he really loved him. And when he heard that Warner Brothers was Disney was very upset with Frankenweenie, he immediately went and offered Tim a job and called Disney, could we take over his contract and all of that? And Disney said yes. And so Tim came to Warner's, and Bob Shapiro was already connected with this idea of being a producer there, and got connected to this picture. So he called me and would I come and meet Tim? So I went and met Tim, And I also was able to get a hold of a print of Vincent, which I ran, and also Frankenweenie, which I ran. And I love both of them. And so Tim and I met and talked for about an hour, and I left and told Bob Shapiro, yes, I'd be very interested in doing this movie. Then Bob did all of his work he had to do to sign me, and we were just finishing the mix on Beverly Hills Cop, and I told Marty Brest and Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, the producers of Beverly Hills Cop, well, I'm going to go to work soon on another movie. And I said, what is it? I said, well, it's a movie starring Pee Wee Herman, and it's being directed by a brand new young director. And they looked at me and said, are you nuts? You just finished this picture, and you're going to go do a Pee Wee Herman movie? And I said, well, I like this director, this young director, and I think he's going to do something really good. This really seems like a good thing. Just quickly tell you, so then, Jim and I did the movie, we finished it, we had this big preview at Grauman's Chinese, a major Hollywood preview. And they, Jerry Bruckheimer and Marty, both were invited to the preview. And they went to the preview. And I saw them immediately afterwards. And they both came up to me and said, okay, fine, you were right.
I want to thank everybody's, yours and everyone on the panel's patience, because I do want to make sure everybody has their moment, and Mark and David, you guys have been very patient. I do have a follow-up question for Billy and Rich specifically, was when you started to turn in your prints in your first cut, what was Warner Brothers' notes on this movie? Because I'm wondering, my guess is they had no idea what they had. And I can just envision, I just don't like the guy in the bow tie, and I don't think it needs to have the bike in it. But outside of that, you know what would be good in this movie? Tawny Katane.
The what?
I know, Warner Brothers really didn't have any notes.
Really?
The script was...
Yeah, well,
Look at this. Farrell swooped in like a sniper. He said, Michael says they didn't really have many notes?
Right?
No, so you said they didn't have any notes, Rich? Do you agree?
I would agree if I knew what he said.
He said that Warner Brothers didn't really have a lot of notes.
What? No,
I will pull this car over.
Okay. I'm old. No, what happened was, I don't remember them being any notes, because they couldn't get it, they never got it. They never got it until it went into the movie theaters. What happened was, Billy reminded me, and I think Michael was saying the same thing, we had a screening, we had a series of screenings. We had one in Austin, Texas. I was concerned about it. All they cared about was, well, we got to do something with this movie. What are we going to do with it? And so they gave us a choice. They said, you could preview the movie and you pick a city and we'll pick a city. I knew that Austin, and it has to be within 2 hours flying distance of Warner Brothers. That was one of the things. They had their own jet, obviously. And so I picked Austin because Paul had done really well in Austin. He was a really big thing in Austin. Certain things happen. So I picked Austin, they picked San Diego. They told me, don't tell anybody that Paul's going to be there. Well, I was worried that nobody would show up. Kind of like tonight, I was worried that nobody would show up. What audience we had. Thank you for coming and rejuvenating our enjoyment in the film. But anyway, so we went to Austin, and I was worried that nobody'd show up, so I bought some time on David Letterman out on my own money, and ran these kind of a PowerPoint commercials to make sure that people would know that this sneak preview was going to be Paul and Pee Wee. And so zillions of people showed up, including the people from Warner Brothers who were angry. What?
100 people showed up at this preview dressed as Pee-wee.
That's true, I forgot about that. And the head of marketing came up waving the newspaper article that I had planted in the paper that Paul was going to be there, going like, you mother. And anyway, the cards were so good. The definitely recommends, which is what they were going by at that time, were at 89%. And then where we did nothing like this at the time, the next day or two in San Diego, they were the same. But they still didn't believe in the movie. And they sent us out, they said, we're gonna open the movie in 3 cities in July. And if it works, then we'll open it in August. And if you know anything about the movie business, which I imagine everybody does here, your money's in July. When it comes to August, that's where they put the other films. And so what happened was we did really well in the 3 cities that we went to.
It outgrows Back to the Future.
And then we scurried around and got into a bunch of theaters, and it opened on August 9th, which actually the Academy's going to celebrate that anniversary, August 9th, will be 40 years, and they're going to have a big thing where, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but they're going to do a big thing and build a lot of it around the bicycle and stuff like that. You know, one of the people that hasn't had a chance to talk, who had a lot to do with this, I'm not trying to take over.
No, please.
But I have
Go.
this is David Snyder.
I'm only now sobering up.
David is one of the great production designer art directors in movies. We've done a couple together, but he did that. And the look of this film, and do you remember, David, what the theme was, what you said?
It ain't bright, it ain't right.
How much of this, the interesting thing about this film is that, to me, this film really did define what I think of as pop art from that decade. I mean, it was around a little bit. Valley Girl was another huge part of that. In terms of fonts and color palette. But what I think of as like the pop 80s, it was sort of codified in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. When you must feel so ripped off by everything that followed this. How much of what you created came from you, Paul, Tim? Was it all, different things came to it? How did you delineate that?
Well, to begin with, I had a call from Bob Shapiro, and I was working at Disney on my science project, and Tim Burton and Tom Ackerman and Rick Heinrichs were all working on Frankenweenie. So at that time, it was the old regime of Disney, the family, and so they'd make 1 or 2 pictures, like Splash or something, but they really didn't want to make movies because they had a lot of income from re-releasing cartoons.
Right.
So I finished my science project, and all of a sudden Jeff Katzenberg and Michael Eisner and Frank Wells took over the studio and turned everything upside down. So Tim was the stage around the corner, and we were odd looking and appearing from everybody else who worked at Disney, who were waiting for Walt to come back to life.
Right.
And Walt would come back and they could keep making,
Fox and the Hound. It felt like an ersatz version of itself.
Yeah, and so I was packing up my boxes at Disney, but Tim and I had offices right across from each other in the old animation building, which is, such a beautiful place and full of talent. So Bob calls me up and says, I'm Bob Shapiro. I was the head of Warner Brothers, and I'm an independent producer now at the company. I have an output deal, and Tim Burton has only asked me for one thing so far. And remember, David, this is the first movie I'm ever producing. So I said, okay. He said, well, Tim Burton, the only thing he has for him is you. And I said, well, that's because I'm the only production designer he ever met. Except for Rick Heinrichs, who wasn't in the union. And who, by the way, has an Academy Awards. Yeah. So he said, so would you like, do you know who Pee Wee is? I said, yeah, I saw the show at the Roxy, he's great. I'm going to Hawaii, I'm burned out. This picture with Dennis Hopper and a bunch of crazy people. It was a very, very expensive sci-fi movie.
What was that?
My Science Project.
Okay.
And it was written by the man who wrote The Last Starfighter, Jonathan. So I said, well, thanks, but I'm burned out. And he said, you know, I called all over town and I asked everybody about you. And I'm packing a box. He said, yeah, and I'm sure they all said they love me. And then Bob said, no, in fact, they all said they hated your guts. But we want to hire you anyway. And at that moment, I took the job. So from the beginning, and by the way, I never even had a meeting on that with Tim Burton, you know. So I got there and set up the art department. So Paul and Tim Burton and I would go shopping on Melrose Avenue for props and things, you know, because that's the look of the film.
Right.
And Tim wanted it to be like a cardboard movie, which it is, the way it is compared to Pee-wee's Playhouse, which is all fashion and design. So it's supposed to be simple, it's not supposed to be like luxurious, it's not supposed to be a lot of things. So we're shopping on Melrose Avenue and we go into a restaurant for lunch. And the waiter that we had, he was kind of rude and service was bad. And so when it come time to pay the check, he put the thing down and Paul Rubens had a Huey Herman credit card, American Express card. I can't tell you the change and attitude of the waiter after he saw that. It was pretty amazing. And then the other thing, it was lucky in the sense, two things happened that really made the movie, and the fact was that the city of Santa Monica was closing down the 3rd Street Mall and turning it into what you know as the Promenade. And all these shops, leases were gone and they were empty, which meant we had a whole city to ourselves. And unlike at the studio, you could shoot the interiors and the exteriors. Like the bicycle shop was a Kenny shoe store. It was empty. So shooting in, shooting out, shooting in, it was like a big blessing. And the other thing was that at the time, Dick Donner, along with Steven Spielberg and Michael Riva, were spending $1 billion on Goonies. So, the shot cop, the studio shot cop was on their ass all the time, building a giant pirate ship in Stage 16. So they pretty much let us alone. We had a $6 to $7 million budget, and Tim and I were going to make this like a handmade looking movie, like Pee-wee's house was a lot more than what you see in the film, because of course, studio took the pencil and says, no living room, no this, no that, no this. So we put what little money we had into the bedroom and the kitchen, and that's pretty much it. And then, because we had so little money, at one point, we had the scene in the Francis bathtub, which of course is a swimming pool, which we're gonna get to. So we had to build it.
Mark, take your shirt off. No, I'm kidding.
We had to build it up off the floor because we didn't have a tank stage. And so what happened is they said,
$80,000 for a bathroom. That guy said to us, I just did my bathroom at home and it only cost $7,000.